On Rivian's last earnings call, you'll notice RJ was very quick to bring up AI and autonomy, and clearly this is a segment of the business that they're investing very heavily in, and I think it deserves a video to just ask for a second, why is so Rivian obsessed with autonomy? Their whole mission statement is keep the world adventurous forever, and trying to figure out what exactly autonomous driving, like hands-free and eyes-free, has to do with keeping the world adventurous. Like, that kind of feels to me more like they're leaning into just, okay, we want the vehicle to be a great daily driver and we want it to just comfortably drive itself on the highway so you can use your phone or read a book while you're driving. But is that more adventurous exactly? And if you do care about the Rivian being a great daily driver and something that's just really fun to be in on the highway, why not invest way more into your sound system? Like the speakers people have been complaining so much about on the Gen 2 vehicles, and how basically every door handle on Gen 2 Rivians gets really squeaky according to most reviews. These are just day-to-day appreciative features that a lot of people are complaining about with these six-figure R1 products, but I have a good theory as to why. It mainly comes down to Rivian wanting to capitalize the most that they can on the AI bubble we're in right now. Sure, you could maybe argue that Rivian's just trying to have feature parity with Tesla, and because so many people buy Teslas and love Teslas for full self-driving capabilities, Rivian wants to remain competitive and have a self-driving alternative that is just as good, if not better, than Tesla's full self-driving approach. And you could argue that that investment helps Rivian maintain market share or maintain competitiveness with their vehicles compared to the competition. But the truth is, Tesla has banked so heavily on autonomous driving and FSD because they believe that the future of their entire business, their entire company, is not actually going to be around selling cars and trying to collect a few $1,000s per sale. Tesla believes the future is robo-taxis, and they've been saying for years now that in the long-term future, most people won't even have cars anymore. They won't need to own them because robo-taxis will be so affordable and so cheap that you'll just hail a robo-taxi anytime you want to drive somewhere, and that's why they've invested so much money, and they are now installing manufacturing equipment for the Cybercab so that they can be the cheapest robo-taxi to manufacture, and they can crank them out like nobody else, and that through Tesla's software, they're going to be able to rack up so much money by just flooding the market with these robo-taxis that that's going to become a much bigger part of the business than just selling cars to individuals or even fleet buyers. So that's the interesting part to me. Rivian doesn't seem to have that kind of mindset of, we're going to pivot the company to become a robo-taxi business and we're going to have your R2 vehicles go out and make you money by driving around autonomously, but they still want that AI association. If you listen to the earnings call, they make it very clear from the beginning that they're betting big on artificial intelligence, and with the R2, they're actually upping the megapixel count. So on the Gen 2 Rivians that they're selling right now, all of those cameras put together have 55 megapixels worth of data, whereas the R2 is going to be making the jump to 65 megapixels, which is pretty nutty when you consider how much more affordable the R2 is supposed to be than their R1 products, roughly half the price. So while they may compromise on range and performance and suspension capabilities and all that, they don't seem to be compromising on autonomous driving and vision-based systems. If anything, they're beefing that up more on the R2. And I personally think it's because AI is kind of the perfect investor bait, especially right now. Everybody in the VC community and everybody who's trying to make a quick buck is investing heavily into AI companies that specialize in machine learning and neural nets because they all think software is where the real money's at because it can scale really quickly. There's not distribution networks and there's not shipping logistics to worry about. For an investor, AI is the perfect, like, flip a switch and convince thousands of people to start paying you monthly to use your AI service, whatever it is, because they saw what happened with OpenAI. You know, it was just the quickest company in history to go from basically a $0 valuation to a $100 million valuation. So now all investors are looking for a quick turnaround. What's going to 10x? And I think personally, RJ and Rivian are trying to capitalize on that by saying, look, we're going to deliver all these tens of thousands of vehicles, and the R2 is going to be this really popular platform that turns Rivian into an international brand, and we're going to be collecting real-world data from hundreds of thousands of cars on the road. And when our autonomy platform is no longer free, right now it is on Gen 2 vehicles, we're suddenly going to be able to turn on this infinite money printer where everybody will be paying us hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars a year to access our superior self-driving systems. I think personally that's the investor community impacting Rivian's normal ethos and normal mission, because frankly, a lot of people out there were probably just fine with highway assist, just keeping the vehicle planted on the road. That's what you see so many Gen 1 Rivian owners doing now. They're all buying Open Pilot, and Open Pilot isn't trying to, navigate through city streets and summon through a parking lot or go through roundabouts or crazy things like that. Most people that are showcasing Open Pilot on the Rivian are just like, hey, this is great because you can get on the highway, turn it on, and it keeps you centered on the lane, which is really what most people, I think, are looking for with driver assist features. RJ's using the argument that investing heavily in eyes-free self-driving is so that we can give our customers their time back. That way you can hop in a Rivian and the car can just drive itself anywhere, is what they're talking about. Not just on highways, but on city streets and navigate through parking lots, and then you don't even have to drive. But it does beg the question, if you're so focused on making the vehicle drive itself completely autonomously, why then spend so much money on making all your vehicles dual motor for all that great acceleration, or all of that time and money designing a crazy air suspension system for off-roading capability, and all of this production time and tooling for triple motor systems and quad motor systems, all to make it as fun a vehicle to drive as possible, only to then turn around and say, yeah, but on the freeway, I guess we'll take over all the driving for you. I don't know. Personally, I think it's a huge investment just for another selling point. Personally, I think they would have been just fine making a vision-based approach of autopilot. That's really what Driver Plus should have been. I don't think they should have relied so heavily on pre-mapped highways. That never seems to work long-term for most of these companies. You're much better off with a generalized approach, like with what Tesla did on autopilot, or what Comma AI did with open pilot. Just keep me centered on the lines and maybe stop if there's vehicles in front of me that are stopped. That covers 90% of what I think people are looking for when it comes to driver assist. But Rivian seems to be banking pretty heavily on city driving as well, and making the vehicle fully autonomous even without anybody paying attention. And that's what makes me think, would Rivian, the adventure-focused company, actually make a RoboTaxi? The first time you hear that, you'd be like, absolutely not. Rivian's not an autonomy company. They don't care about RoboTaxis. They're an adventure-focused company. No, Rivian wants SUVs, right? They want to make the R3 a reality, because I love the R3, and their focus is just making great off-roading adventure vehicles, right? But as much as you may think that, I used to think that too, then I started thinking about the delivery van. Not a great lifestyle van, by the way. The range isn't really there if you wanted to convert it into a vehicle you could live out of. But why did Rivian so early in the company's history, when they were burning so much cash and struggling to get the R1T and R1S out into the market, why would they be burning so much money and also be willing to have a side quest where they just build a city-based delivery van that's not really meant for camping, that's not really meant for off-roading? It's a front-wheel drive, pretty low to the ground van, purpose-built for Amazon deliveries, and be willing to crank them out by the tens of thousands. Why would Rivian do that? It's a very simple answer. It's because they needed the money. They needed the cash, and Amazon was willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an existing EV company to give them lower cost per mile transport for their packages. So at that time, when Rivian agreed to do that deal, they could make a lot of money by doing something that's somewhat outside of their mission statement. I don't think Rivian delivery vans necessarily help the world be more adventurous, but sometimes you gotta eat your vegetables, or sometimes you gotta do things that pay the bills, even if it's not necessarily the most fun. So while I think the R1, the R2, and the R3 vehicles are probably where RJ's passion is, that aligns more with Rivian's mission. Sometimes there's some things Rivian does in order to capitalize on whatever the market is in demand for. How can they utilize their existing technology to bring in more recurring and profitable revenue? And in the early days of Rivian, that was the delivery van, and I think that was probably the right call, even though it doesn't really line up with what the R1T and R1S are trying to accomplish. Just make great, fun to drive off-roading vehicles that make people feel more adventurous. Delivery van was very by the books. This is what Amazon wants. Let's deliver exactly what they want. Doesn't need fast charging, doesn't need high range, even though that would have helped it be more of an adventure van you could later sell for lifestyle usage. They didn't do that because they were focused on making it a profitable vehicle that Amazon would be happy with. But now we're in a different time where Amazon Amazon probably has multiple different options to choose from when it comes to EV startups that can deliver vans, and Rivian is probably, because of earlier deals they made with Amazon, losing quite a bit of money on those Prime vans. That's why they've opened up the delivery van to third parties outside of Amazon, because they're probably paying a lot more for those vans. So if down the road Rivian wants to leverage their existing software and electronics to bring in more recurring revenue for the business to help further fund the manufacturing of the R2 and R3 vehicles, I actually wouldn't put it past them, especially now that they've announced Rivian is going to be having an AI and autonomy day, almost a carbon cut copy of what Tesla has done in the past, except Tesla used AI Day as a recruitment technique that eventually turned into the Optimus program, the Tesla bot. I don't think Rivian's got a humanoid robot in the works. I hope I'm right about that, but at least in my opinion, what could leverage their existing technology in regards to batteries and manufacturing and their autonomy platform. Personally, why do I think Rivian wants to have an autonomy day? Is it just so that they can tell the world that, by the way, our vehicles are going to continue to have great highway assist features, so you should keep on buying them? No, I don't think they would have a whole event just for that, personally. I could be way off on this prediction, but I actually think Rivian is having an AI and autonomy day, partially to please the investor community, but it's probably going to be where they unveil a Rivian RoboTaxi product. And I expect this to align far more with more of the Rivian delivery van side of the business, as in the RoboTaxi is not really meant for off-roading. It's not meant to be like an R3 vehicle. It's meant for them to have more supply chain leverage when they're negotiating with suppliers for components. They'll be able to order a lot more cameras or NVIDIA chips if they're building RoboTaxis alongside their R2 and R3 vehicles. And if Rivian is able to make a very successful, very autonomous self-driving system, then a RoboTaxi could help them secure a lot more profits over the long haul. I just hope Rivian doesn't forget who they are. I hope they don't forget their roots, that at the end of the day, you make great vehicles, okay? And don't forget about Gear Guard Gary, and of course the R3, which is going to be an amazing vehicle. Can't wait for that thing to exist, but maybe in order to sell it at a low price, Rivian's got to bring in some more profit from the autonomy platform. And I think Tesla knows, as well as Rivian, that where the real money is with autonomous driving comes down to RoboTaxi business models. It's not through charging people a monthly fee on their existing vehicles, because Tesla doesn't even report that. They're a huge company. They've got way more vehicles on the road than Rivian, and yet they don't want to talk about how much money they've generated just from memberships of FSD or people buying it for the car. They don't break that down as a separate profit sector for the business, because they know that's not probably where most of the money is, and likely 80% of Tesla customers don't pay for it. But I think Rivian's gonna have their own cyber cab in the works, and they're probably gonna unveil it at this autonomy day later in the year. But what do you guys think? Am I way off on this one? Do you not think Rivian would pursue autonomous driving the same way they pursued package delivery for Amazon for the greater good of collecting more investor money? Feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.